asked you what you wanted from a regional news service, and you told us. From July the 9th, Anglia will broadcast a separate news service to the east and west of the region. Twice the news, twice the service. Anglia News, through the day from July the 9th.
You're watching Anglia Television, now the news from ITN, at 10 o'clock.
Government's illegal sweeteners over Rover sale must be repaid. MPs blame Parkinson for bungling electricity sale. Deported fans say sports minister encouraged Italian police violence. Labour cuts the voting power of the unions. And the Pope adds his blessing to the luck of the Irish. Good evening. The European Commission has ruled that British Aerospace must repay more than £44 million it received from the government to help it purchase the Rover Group. The EC Commissioner, Sir Leon Britton, decided that the sweeteners paid to British Aerospace during the takeover were illegal. But he said Rover was sold at a reasonable market price.
Lord Young has described the sale of Rover to British Aerospace as the deal of the decade. What he didn't disclose at the time was just how good a deal Aerospace had struck. And today the European Commission delivered its verdict. The sweeteners offered were illegal, they have to be repaid. The deal included a cash injection of £800 million into Rover and a write-off of tax losses, but those were disclosed at the time. The Commission was more worried about the value put on the company. In 1988, the National Audit Office valued the Rover Group at more than £200 million, but it was sold at the apparently knockdown price of £150 million. On top of the bargain, there were various extras or sweeteners thrown in. £11 million for Rover and British Aerospace expenses. £22 million saved on interest because of deferred payments. And the commissioners say there was another £11 million in tax breaks. Some in Europe certainly wanted Aerospace to pay back more than the £44 million. But in the end, Mr. Britton ordered only the repayment of the sweeteners and accepted the value put on the company.
No, it wasn't a giveaway, no. Maybe there was a large amount of aid given, but there were reasons which, rightly or wrongly, satisfied the previous commission. And we've got to maintain a certain coherence. You can't just say, right, let's have another go at the whole thing. You've got to ask yourself, has something really new come to light which would entitle you to take a different view?
What we have had is not just a deception that was accidental, but a decision that is revealed in all the correspondence between Lord Young and the private British Aerospace company to deceive both the European Commission and the British public and indeed Parliament.
Lord Young admitted hiding details of the deal from Brussels in evidence to a select committee, but he and many Conservatives still fiercely defend the sale.
If that company had remained in public ownership, there were still guarantees of about £750 million, which the taxpayer would have had to pick up. Come on, we've got to balance all of that against this 40 million that we're now talking about, which at the end of the day is peanuts.
Tomorrow, Trade and Industry Secretary Nicholas Ridley will answer the charge that the government has deceived both the House of Commons and the European Commission. He's unlikely to be apologetic. The government case remains that this was a good deal for the taxpayer. Peter Allen, News at 10, Westminster.
The former Energy Secretary Cecil Parkinson has been severely criticised by an all-party group of MPs for mishandling the privatisation of electricity. The Energy Select Committee said he went ahead despite warnings that the plan was badly prepared. He's also accused of paying too little attention to the costs of nuclear power.
Together before privatisation, Cecil Parkinson and the former head of the Central Electricity Generating Board, Lord Marshall. Lord Marshall resigned over the government's plans for the nuclear industry. Mr. Parkinson is today blamed for the collapse of Britain's nuclear power programme. The mistakes only emerged after Mr. Parkinson was replaced as Energy Secretary by John Wakeham.
I've had some difficult decisions to make, he had some difficult decisions to make, and we've each done our best. I'm sure neither of us were perfect, but we haven't done too badly.
I think John Wakeham being present is the one reason we now have the truth. That coupled with privatisation.
According to today's report, Mr. Parkinson went ahead with a policy that was inadequately prepared, failed to obtain the information needed to ascertain whether the policy would work, gave insufficient priority to nuclear issues which were central to the plan, and allowed the nuclear question to remain unresolved until it was too late.
nuclear energy, which we were told for so long was going to be cheap and plentiful, is not any longer considered to be cheap. In fact, if we take into account the full costs of reprocessing the fuel after it's been used, if we take into account the cost of decommissioning power stations when they've come to the end of their useful life, nuclear energy is about 2.5 times the price of electricity from coal, oil or gas.
There was no evidence that Lord Marshall and the CEGB misled the government on costs. Rather, the industry misled itself in its enthusiasm for nuclear power.
There has been systematic deception of the British people by officials working in the nuclear industry and also by officials at the Department of Energy, and I suspect from time to time successive ministers who were strongly in favour of nuclear power.
The committee had warned Mr Parkinson that he was in danger of producing ill-considered, spatchcock legislation. The end product, they say, fulfilled their worst fears.
The treatment of England's football fans in Italy led to a row in the Commons today. The Sports Minister, Colin Moynihan, labelled the fans deported from Italy last night as football's effluent tendency. But Labour's Dennis Howell accused him of mass libel and claimed that innocent people had been deported without trial.
There was uproar in the Commons when Labour's Dennis Howell accused Colin Moynihan of mass libel against England's fans.
Increasingly frenzied utterances of the Minister, particularly about innocent people deported without trial, have no support on the opposition benches or from responsible people.
He's echoed the pleas of the louts who comprise football's effluent tendency. Mr. Speaker, the government stands shoulder to shoulder with all decent people in this country who condemn the criminally motivated minority of so-called England fans.
MPs taunted each other with cries of hooligan after Mr Moynihan said he fully supports the Italian police. Mr Howell says that's a licence for police violence.
The Italian police are being urged by Mr Moynihan to wade in, and they're attacking guilty and innocent alike. Now that's unlawful in Italian law, English law or European law.
The returning fans maintained their innocence, saying they were arrested indiscriminately.
Moynihan wants to come and sit down with a football supporter and have a talk. He wants to be out there because if you had been out there on the streets, you would have got locked up. Any English person.
Blame bloody Moynihan! Blame Moynihan!
The Football Supporters Association is also blaming Mr Moynihan.
Those police, when they overreacted to incidents, he was the first to congratulate them for what amounted to frontal assaults upon in a military-style fashion against England's supporters. So, I mean, we're quite disgusted.
It's still not clear just how many of these fans were innocently caught up in the trouble. The mother of one of them claimed her son was in a restaurant a mile from the scene of the fighting when Italian police came in, arrested anyone English and took them to the airport to join this unprecedented mass deportation.
Police investigating the IRA bombing at the Carlton club in London say the security camera outside the building was switched off for the time of the attack. Police had been hoping that a tape from the camera above the entrance would provide important evidence, but the tape they examined turned out to be several days old.
Labour's ruling National Executive has approved wide-ranging proposals to reform the structure of the party. They include a reduction in the trade union block vote and a new national policy forum. The measures will be debated at the party conference this autumn.
Labour leaders say they're delighted with the new proposals, which they believe will nail any accusations that they're in the pockets of the trade unions. The hard left joined the unions themselves in voting to reduce the power of the block vote so that more power could go to ordinary members.
I think there's a consensus within the party that the share of the trade union vote has got to be reduced, and the constituencies have got to be given more say.
The left opposed the idea of a new national body to debate Labour policy, but that too was agreed by a substantial majority. The new National Policy Forum, which will debate key issues ahead of conference, will have around 180 members, elected from the National Executive, Labour MPs, Euro MPs, regional and local authorities. There'll be reserved seats for women, 40% of the total, and ethnic minorities. On the block vote, the trade unions now control 90% of the votes at Labour Party conference, with the constituencies having 9 and other groups 1. The union's power will be cut to 70%, with the suggestion that it could eventually drop to 40. The constituencies will increase their share as they recruit new members. For the Labour leader, the changes were the fruit of nearly 7 years' work.
It means a more rational, a more cogent, a more realistic, and a more democratic and effective way of deciding upon the development of our policy. That'll do us good. More important in many ways, it'll do the country good too.
There's general agreement within the Labour Party that these amendments to its 70-year-old constitution are long overdue. But the process of reform will take time, and even these changes won't be in place until well after the next general election. Mark Webster, News at 10 at the Labour Party headquarters.
And the Labour Party has ordered a rerun of the contest to select its parliamentary candidate for the Birkenhead constituency in Merseyside. The decision follows last year's deselection of the current MP Frank Field, who claimed there was militant activity in the local party.
The government's to go ahead with its plans to charge cap 21 local authorities. The announcement came after the Court of Appeal dismissed appeals by 19 of the councils against the decision to cap their poll taxes because they set what the government described as excessive budgets.
The government has announced plans for new laws to control dangerous dogs. They include possible powers to ban some breeds. The RSPCA described the proposals as half-baked, impractical and unenforceable.
As the government was outlining its proposals this afternoon, the RSPCA and police were facing up to the realities of dog control. In this raid, they found 2 Doberman dogs in squalid conditions, with evidence they'd been starved.
This is dog feces, which, as you can see, contains no food material. That's cellophane and plastic and paper, and it simply means that the animal's been so hungry that it's eaten non-food material in order to survive.
It's routine. In a separate investigation this week, a starving bitch and her puppies were found abandoned in a flat. 2 of the puppies have since died. The RSPCA say no wonder some dogs turn savage. It's the owners, not the dogs, who need controlling. Today's proposals follow a spate of attacks on people by big dogs such as Rottweilers. Little Daniel Hassan from Birmingham needed 100 stitches. The Home Office hope their plan will make owners more responsible. The proposals include new powers to seize, detain or destroy dangerous dogs, powers to enforce muzzling, controls on certain breeds, a ban on allowing dogs to stray, and a new offence of allowing a dog to be dangerously out of control. But the mother of Kelly Lynch, who died in an attack, tonight said the proposals were cosmetic and didn't go far enough, a view shared by the RSPCA.
They're a half-hearted attempt, I think, to influence the Lords into making what the government consider to be the right decision, when in reality, the only decision to make is, as we've long said, dog registration.
They say a national registration scheme would have prevented the dogs found in today's raid from suffering squalor and starvation. Malcolm Munro, News at 10, South East London.
Crime figures due out tomorrow are expected to show a rise of around 10% on last year's figures. Many of Britain's police say the public are becoming less sympathetic and more violent towards them, a special report in Part 2. Plus, the Strangeways governor speaks of the decision he'll regret for the rest of his life. And the Queen Mother gets a happy birthday to remember. That's in a couple of minutes.
The UK's leading building society predicts that falling house prices in the south are levelling out. So shouldn't you be thinking of moving to a new wimpy home in case they start rising again? You'll find one going for a song near you.
Wrong! 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 Right!
Well, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, little darling.
Get up and go with Renault this summer. Go for the Renault Famous 5s with 0% finance. Go for the special edition Renault 19 Sports. It's got the same offer going for it. Get up and go for power with the Renault 21. Go for luxury from the Renault 25. And if it's versatility you're after, the Renault Espace has got more going for it. For more of everything, get up and go to your Renault dealer.
Malibu with lemon, orange, or ultraviolet.
Hi.
Hi.
Was it something I said?
Just business.
Long?
A month.
It's long.
I called round last night, but you had company.
You mean my brother? Came round for coffee.
Brother?
Golden roasted, richer, smoother, Nescafe Gold Blend.
I forgot to say, I'll be in New York.
I hope you remember to take some Gold Blend with you.
So you might like to know I'm staying at the Plaza.
Oh, Philadelphia.
I'm sorry?
Philadelphia.
Oh, no, it's light Philadelphia, actually.
It looks the same.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? And it tastes the same. But light Philadelphia has only half the fat.
Oh, lovely. So, if you've only had half the fat, that means you can have the other half?
Light Philadelphia, half the fat, but not half tasty.
It's thought that crime figures out tomorrow will show a 10% rise on the same time last year. The increase is putting more pressure on the police. They say they're being made to spend more time dealing with bureaucracy and less with policing. The Police Federation fear this is leading to a crisis in morale.
Derby Central Police Station last Friday night. The police say this man has been urinating in the street, which he denies.
You, you bastard!
Many police feel that public attitudes towards them are changing.
Hold on a minute. Will you assist this officer?
They say there's not the same respect because of all the bad publicity they're getting, and that's having one effect.
They're more prone to subjectives to abuse on the streets. When we walk past, probably witnessed tonight a couple of times where we've just simply driven past. The young lads have been out drinking, wave at us, shout at us, abuse us, even threaten us.
Detectives here in Derby's inner city are frustrated because they feel they haven't got the equipment to tackle rising crime. Last night's crop of 30 crimes has to be written up in the crime book in Dickensian fashion.
I should be punching those details in the computer within seconds, showing it up on a screen, and a man should be looking at that on a screen and going out. If somebody rang up here today and said, I've got a piece of property here in front of me which I think may be stolen, the only reference I've got is that massive crime book, and I've got to go through it. Each entry, each daily entry.
These detectives, who between them have more than 80 cases on the go, are on the way to see an old lady who's had her £15,000 life savings stolen while one of the thieves talked to her on the doorstep.
Is it being recorded? The main witness is an 83-year-old lady who's the only person who can point us in the right direction. We just need a bit of luck, really.
I don't like CID.
You don't?
But door-to-door inquiries don't provide such luck. And even when they get a lead, all the key witnesses have to be tape recorded, and the detectives themselves have to transcribe the tapes.
You're talking about an hour and a half, 2 hours per tape. And how many tapes have you got then? About 14.
The detectives' low success rate causes public dissatisfaction. But the public in the village of Tibshelf are very happy with their community policeman. He's known and liked by everybody, especially the school children. But he gets fed up because he's often called away because of shortages elsewhere.
You get frustrated that you're wanting to do a job. Some say for a community, if it's just dealing with the kind of thing, you took off it to go to somewhere else. Or that your work is piling up, but you're frustrated that you can't sort that job out.
The Police Federation say that if cutbacks continue, bobbies like this will have to go altogether, further alienating the public. And many ordinary policemen feel if they don't get public backing, there'll be a crisis in British policing.
It can only get worse. I think we're going to get more abuse, we're going to get less respect, and that can only lead to large problems.
The governor of Strangeways Prison has said he'll regret for the rest of his life that he didn't check security in the chapel where the riot broke out. Mr. Brendan O'Friel also gave details of the plans to retake the prison and how they were cancelled at the last minute.
Brendan O'Friel, the man who dubbed the Strangeways Riot an explosion of evil, today gave evidence as to how the trouble at his prison began. He told the inquiry he'd failed to check security in the prison chapel, a decision he said he'd regret to the end of his days. He then described the critical moments when a plan was devised to storm the jail, but later abandoned and the riot officers stood down. With the Deputy Director General of the Prison Service, Brian Eames, also present, Mr. O'Friel told of the telephone conversations they'd had about ending the siege. At 1 o'clock, the log recorded 120 prisoners still unaccounted for, still contemplating best way into main prison. All options being considered, trying to ensure enough force to make it successful. But 2 hours later, Mr. Eames phoned Mr. O'Friel, telling him not to proceed with the attack. It was then revealed that this critical telephone call was the only one which was not recorded. It's understood that Mr. Eames had been briefing ministers and was not in his usual place in the incident room when he made the call. Mr. Eames is expected to give evidence to the inquiry tomorrow. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Manchester.
Mrs. Thatcher has announced that Britain is to give more than £5 million to help third world nations switch to more ozone-friendly technology. She was speaking to an international environmental conference in London, where she received an award for promoting green issues.
In announcing Britain's donation to an international fund to save the ozone layer, Mrs. Thatcher put pressure on countries like China and India to join in. More money was available for ozone-friendly technology if they banned substances destroying the layer, which protects the Earth from the sun's harmful radiation.
However tight the controls in the protocol, we can't achieve satisfactory results while major producers and users of these substances remain